Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. For today's episode, I have a very special guest as we are going to be discussing the metal mindset and how to use that to make positive changes in your everyday life. So joining me here today from North Carolina is CJ Ortiz. CJ is the founder of Metal Motivation, a series of motivational audio and video courses designed to help you focus and supercharge your life. CJ shows you how to use the spirit and never surrender attitude of heavy metal to help achieve your goals and deal with the daily grind. Metal Motivation also has a line of apparel, some of which you have seen me wear on this channel, like my brand new metal shirt. This is going back now, CJ.
Wow. Yes, sir.
Metal Motivation, I
Mhm.
customized the sleeves off of it.
You're
I
right.
will be including links in the description below to all the services and merchandise that CJ and Metal Motivation offers. So thank you for joining me here at the Lair, CJ.
My friend, good to see you. Good to see you for the first time. You were just talking offline, telling me how long you actually go back with Metal Motivation, and not many can say that, man.
All the way back to iPods. I was downloading your stuff. So that really dates us. Who out there remembers iPods?
Yeah, right.
All
iPod
right.
minis.
Yeah. All right. Well, I gave a brief description of some of what you do, but I know you do a lot of stuff. So tell the viewers in your own words what Metal Motivation is all about and some of the services that you offer.
Well, it began about 12 years ago. Actually, the year before that, almost 13 years ago, we launched it officially on Halloween of 2009 because I wanted the anniversary to always be on Halloween. But it's basically just motivation for metalheads, inspiration, motivation for people who love heavy metal. My reasoning behind it is simply that what metal did for me is what I'm doing for others. And that's what it means to be a metal motivator. But that also means you can be one too, right? Since, I mean, nobody continually listens to heavy metal if it's a destructive force in your life. And I don't know a lot of people taking, classical music or country music to the gym. So it tends to be something that's going to be aggressive, like hard rock, heavy metal, hip hop, something like that. So it is a motivating force, even though a lot of people don't think it is. They see the skulls or they hear the evil titles or something like that, and they think, no, there's nothing motivational. It's destructive. It is not destructive. Of course, we've all seen dozens now of official scientific papers and articles saying how much this aggressive music is healthy for you to channel those aggressions. But that's music. So what I did is just put a face and a name to articulate certain. That doesn't mean that what I teach is exclusively heavy metal. I'm not. It's not a. I'm not a wrestler doing some kind of shtick on TV. It's nothing like that. If you were to listen to it after a while, you would just say, "Well, yeah, I listened to CJ online." You wouldn't even say Metal Motivator or all of that. But it's the edginess, it's the black and white nature of it, it's some of the depth of it, it's the very, again, healthy, aggressive approach to it. And I think it's just something that, in the age of social media, when there's so many voices competing for attention, that it's nice to have something for this particular community. Because before me, people, if they sat down and wanted to get some kind of video or article on a particular motivational or self-help topic, they would just put that phrase into Google, and whatever came up was whatever came up. They didn't care whether it was Tony Robbins or something like that, that Tony Robbins was heavy metal. They're just looking for information. They don't care that it's delivered by somebody who's heavy metal. But even more so now that it can be delivered to you. So often say, I give people the shorthand, what's metal motivation? It's like Tony Robbins meets Metallica. Now, again, that doesn't mean I'm like Tony Robbins, and that doesn't mean I don't understand all the controversy around Metallica. It's just a shorthand version to explain to people who are not familiar with this what metal motivation is. But yeah, very much a lot of my own personal philosophy, but it's not esoteric, not mystical, not magical. I'm not telling you to pray. I'm not telling you to mind over matter. It's really more mind over your own lazy butt.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I found you. I mean, I'm a metalhead. I came across some of your stuff. I think it was on YouTube. And being a metalhead, I made that connection. And I was able to feel sort of that spirit and the energy of metal, if you
Right.
will, coming through in what you did. And metal for me, I don't really tell this story very. I don't think I've ever told this story on my channel, but when I was younger, I was very sick. I had a lot of
Mm.
health issues, and metal for me was sort of the way for me to. It gave me strength. It gave
Yeah.
me energy. It got me out of bed. They were almost like superheroes or comic
Right.
book heroes to me. And that's why heavy metal and hard rock it means so much to me, because it's been such a part of my life.
Yes.
It's been it's like it's always feels like it's always been there with me. It's been there at my lowest
Yes.
points. It's been there at my highest points.
Yes.
And so that's what I found so appealing when I came across you know, your your stuff, your YouTube stuff, and your website and everything. I connected with it that way, and I also appreciated I know you do. I forget what you title it exactly, but just sort of like short little 1 or 2 minute kind of
Right.
get your day started, just
Right.
quick little bursts,
Right.
and
Daily screams for living
that's it.
aggressively.
Right, daily screams. And,
Mm.
rather than getting bogged down in a whole bunch of wordy kind of stuff and a whole bunch of, like you said, it gets right to
To the
business. It
point.
gets
Yeah.
right down to business and, the matters at hand. So, all right, but let's go back a little bit just for a second.
Sure.
Let's just set it up. So tell me, when and how did you discover heavy metal?
Wow, metal for me. Let's see. I'm 55 now. So for me, I was blessed to be part of the new wave of British heavy metal coming to the States. And there's a short window of opportunity for that. Now, as a kid, I was actually born in New York and raised there for the first 13 years of my life. And there, I was a hodgepodge of everything. And for rock, what really started the ball rolling for me, because my stepdad would play my lullabies were Neil Young songs, Cat Stevens songs. Those are the things that he would play on the guitar and put me and my brothers to sleep. And so I'd heard like Zeppelin and things like that, but nothing really caught me until I first encountered Kiss in 1976 on the Paul Lynde Halloween special. And and over the years, I've heard so many people say the same thing from my age bracket, that, like, as you'll hear a lot of older musicians say, that it was the Beatles on what was the show,
Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan show,
Yeah.
that was the thing that changed and revolutionized it. And it did. More bands were created by that one appearance on Ed Sullivan by the Beatles than just about anything else. The next time that you find that happening
It's
with
Kiss.
so many hard rock and heavy
Yeah.
metal bands is
Yeah.
seeing Kiss for the first time on the Paul Lynde Halloween special. But still, I was still a hodgepodge. I listened to all kinds of stuff. And then when I relocated to Texas, that's when things really began to change, because in New York, it was very pluralistic culturally. You know what I mean? I mean, talk about, it's funny to hear people talk so much about, things about race today, whereas back then it was like, man, you were just in it together. Nobody was the same race. It was just everybody had a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But that was just the Northeast. When I got to Texas in like 1979, that was, I tell people, it's like, you can tell me about growing up in Watts or Harlem or the South Bronx or something like that as a rough neighborhood, Detroit. And I'm sure those are really, really rough neighborhoods. But there's a strange kind of roughness to growing up in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, especially when you come right off the boat from New York with that accent.
Yeah.
Because I remember they would drive around, and on the back of cars, there was a bumper sticker that said, "Love New York, take 35 East." But that was during the time, remember the big I Love New York
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
advertising campaigns on TV all the time. Love New York, we'll get the hell out of here.
yeah.
So, and when I got to Texas, I'm not a tall person. Everybody was a giant. So it wasn't difficult in the sense that you got to watch your back because of street gangs. It was such an intimidation and almost like hazing, if you will, for an eternity. They were just ruthless, especially to a little guy like me, fresh off the boat, not a friend in the world. And I, had this strong New York accent. Well, one day in front of my house, there were some high school kids just across the street in like a Camaro or something with the windows down. It's summertime, just about 7 o'clock or so. And we were still doing a little yard work, me and my brothers, but they had their stereo blasting. So again, this is 79. And all of a sudden I hear this sound coming out of this car. And I froze because I'd never heard anything like it. And it was the siren intro to Running with the Devil by Van Halen. And I just remember how big it sounded. I just remember trying to keep working, and I didn't want to look at those people, but listening so intently to this. It just sounded so big and so raw. And I just kept listening when the song ended, but you know what comes next? Eruption.
Yeah.
And
Game
so
changer.
so here I am I don't know who I am. I'm in a new place. I'm surrounded by enemies and giants. And there's this music that's coming through. Now, granted, that's not heavy metal, but that's where we left the Kiss sort of thing. Kiss, ZZ Top, AC/DC, and it kind of got more into that bigger sound. And then I would go back to New York to visit my father in the summer. And when I did, I hooked up with a family friend, and he said, I want you to come down and meet some friends. We're going to go hang out in the woods. So we went down to his neighborhood, hang out in the woods with these guys. And all of a sudden I noticed all these guys had jean jackets on with patches and pins and stuff like that, bands I'd never heard of. And they had a big juke, what do you call it, jam box around the campfire. Everybody's just drinking beer. I'm, what am I, 15, 13, 14, something, I don't know. And that's when I heard the first two Iron Maiden albums, Raven, Angel Witch, Diamond Head, just all of the early Def Leppard, everything I heard for the very first time. And that's when everything got religious at that point. So I came home, and the first thing I did was go out to buy Iron Maiden. So I went the next year, the year after was not the beginning of 1982. I think it was 1982. We went with that same friend, when I went back to New York, went down to Manhattan at the Palladium and saw Iron Maiden on the Number of the Beast tour.
Wow.
At the Palladium, dude. And the Rods opened up, which is still my favorite three-piece band to this day.
Yeah.
And I was right in front of Dave Murray. It wasn't hard to get up front in the Palladium. That was it. I was changed forever. Then within 2 years or less came Metallica and Slayer and Anthrax and the likes of it. And so it was, of course, I mean, I dug on the initial first two Motley Crue albums, but by the time Theater of Pain came out, and I saw the back of that, and I saw all the pink and the frills and the whatever, I was already a couple albums deep into Merciful Fate and Celtic Frost. So it was just, we were done, we were gone, so it kind of took off from there. But also I have to make as a footnote, I was good friends with the guys from Pantera, particularly Daryl and Rex, because they were our age group, and they were, as people call them a glam band. I wouldn't really call them a glam band. They kind of sounded more like a Riot than a Rat, So it wasn't quite glammy in that sense, but this is long before Phil. And in fact, one of my best friends, who actually I started Metal Motivation with, if you remember, Todd Pack, the other guy that was with me, Dimebag heard Master of Puppets for the very first time at Todd's apartment.
Wow.
But yeah, so being in the middle of the country, I make that mental note, because being in the middle of the country of Texas at that time, you kind of got the newsletter late, so we had people who were like into Metallica, but like were still puffing their hair. You know what I mean? Because the memo hadn't gotten, you didn't have the internet. So we're a year or so behind. And so you get this, newsletter like, oh, you're not supposed to be having that eyeliner on. So, and after a while, of course, everybody became acclimated to a monoculture, but that was kind of my trek into metal.
That's awesome. Awesome, man. Awesome story. It's fun thinking back, before the internet, how did you hear things? How did people hear things? Well,
Hmm.
a lot of it was sort of luck or happenstance. Maybe you had an older brother, you had a friend who had an older brother. Maybe somebody parks a Camaro across the street from you while you're
Yep.
raking the leaves. I mean, this is just how
Well,
things
I mean,
worked right
you know,
then.
it's, I always think whenever we have this conversation, I love having this particular conversation with old school metalheads because there was something magical about that time, about waiting to get things, about being a pen. Like when I found Kill 'Em All, it was at a record store in Dallas, and it was a tape. They didn't have an album in the import section.
Wow.
Wasn't even in the main, it was in the import section. And I didn't know. I just bought it sight unseen and looked at the back and looked, these guys look really rough. I said, this has got to be good. But that, you know, what I always think of when I have this conversation is the lyrics from Denim and Leather, you know, from by Saxon, when he
Sure.
starts asking, where were you? You know, were you
Yeah.
there waiting in those ice and snow and, you know, hanging out at the local record store? That's what you had to do because that's where the communication was. And when you would go to shows, you know, because I saw all the bands on their initial tours in the States: Merciful Fate, Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Motorhead, Metallica. They're on the Kill 'Em All for one tour, Metallica and Raven. And those shows, to be waiting outside to get into these small venues like the Bronco Bowl, you know, not these big arenas, but seeing them at that time, you know, it in the fall and you're in Denim and Leather, it's the air is ripe with electricity. The excitement is more than I can conceivably communicate to another human being.
Yeah.
It was religion. That's why we always say, I never met the guy who said, oh, I was in the Slayer, you know, summer of 85. No, you weren't into Slayer. If you're not still into Slayer or whatever it is today, you
Yeah.
were not into it at that time. So metal
Yeah,
has you for life.
it is something with metal, you know, metalheads are they're very passionate, and it's you don't meet many just real sort of casual metalheads, like you said, like, oh,
Mhm.
I was just in a Slayer for a year, or yeah, I was into, you know, Anthrax and Metallica, but you know, I grew out of it, or you
Right.
know, it's something that really becomes like kind of part of your life. And I always have a laugh, like, yeah, okay, I've got the long hair, and people cannot often. I'll be wearing a shirt or something, and people can put two and two together. But sometimes you'll be somewhere, and you'll meet somebody. You know, I had a guy over here working on some electrical thing, and he could see in my room here all my
Mhm.
records, and he was like, "Oh, so you like music?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. What kind of music?" "I like harder stuff." "Yeah, like what?" "I like heavy metal." "So do I." "What kind of heavy metal?" I said, "You know, old school stuff like Metallica." And "So do I." And it was just like, you know, all of a sudden it's like, you know, so
Yeah.
we're like we were long lost friends or something. You know, it's like you have
Yeah.
that bond with people. You know, you can be somewhere, and it's happened dozens of times. I'll be out somewhere, anywhere. I'm at Barnes and Nobles or something,
Yeah.
looking at a magazine, and somebody like, "Hey man, cool Uriah Heep shirt," you
Mhm.
know, and then all of a sudden you're in a 20-minute conversation with somebody about your favorite Uriah Heep album. I mean, it's just
Oh yeah, there's just so many times I used to say to people, I'd say, yeah, when you meet another metalhead at an airport, you're both going to miss your flight because you're going to get into it. Yeah, and I tell people all the time too. I said, you want to have some fun, just wear an Iron Maiden or Metallica shirt. You don't again. I know I'm into all kinds of new bands. I'm not stuck in the 80s, believe me. But if you want to have some fun, go out to grocery stores or shopping or restaurants or whatever, and just wear a big bold Iron Maiden or Metallica shirt and watch how many people will
flash the horns
nod
at
at you.
you, or yeah.
Yeah, and some of it, and it'll be like the guy who's walking with his two small kids and his wife, and just got out
Yeah.
of a minivan, and he's got a coral shirt and khaki, you know, shorts and some flip flops and hair really short. And the guy who you wouldn't think, you know what I mean, who's
Yeah.
into it, and he's going to be like Iron Maiden.
It's true.
They're out there, man.
That's right. That's
Well,
right. We're out there. We're
the
everywhere.
proof, is I took my kids, I say kids, two in the 30s, one in the early 20s, but they'd never seen Metallica before. So a couple of years ago, Metallica did the Hardwired tour. They came to my city here in Raleigh, and they played at the big indoor arena, which is for our hockey team, the Hurricanes. And it took us, once we got off the highway to get in, it took 2 hours to get in.
Wow.
And found out the next day that they had set a record attendance for the entire history of that stadium.
Wow.
That's 18-year history of that stadium with comedians. The biggest shows on earth have played there, and the sellout all time is Metallica. That's why I don't like people dissing on Metallica,
Yeah.
because the biggest band in the world, the biggest touring act in history, is a band called Metallica.
Yeah.
For God's sake, I don't care what you think of Lars's snare drum. It's Metallica.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
I do that. I tell people that all the time. I say, I did a video on my channel in defense of the Black Album, because a lot of
I
metalheads
love the
tend to
Black
be
Album,
like,
dude.
okay, they're either the first like 4 albums, and some people don't care for the Black Album. And I tell people, I say, people will say to me like, oh, this or that about the Black Album. I say, look, that album is, if you look at some of the best-selling albums of all time, all genres,
Yeah.
that album is right up there. I mean, it is up there with Michael Jackson's Thriller, the
Oh, yeah.
Eagles' greatest hits.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
Metallica is one of the few bands in this genre that can go anywhere in the world and play a stadium. They can play a stadium in Raleigh, they can play a stadium in Stockholm and sell it out. There's not a lot of bands. I mean, AC/DC can do that.
Right.
Maybe Iron Maiden to a certain degree,
Right.
depending on where they are. But so you can feel however you want to feel about the Black Album, but it clearly, they did something right. And I said, hey, if you had a business, if you had a restaurant and you started serving a certain type of food and your business exploded 100
Yeah.
times, you would say, I'm going to keep serving this, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, hey, this is a success. That's the
Yeah.
definition of success. So whether you like it or not, and I respect Metallica for, when they changed, this was right before the grunge bomb dropped. So
Yeah.
Metallica, maybe they felt it in the wind or something. It wasn't like they were 5 years into grunge and then they decided to do this. I mean, they did this. This is something that they wanted to do and something that they believed in and felt they needed to do. And I respect them for that. And as much as there's albums in Metallica's catalog that I don't care for, I always respect them for trying different things and doing what they want to do. And hey, they're really, really successful. So who's to argue with their
the
methods?
Black Album is a metal album. There's nothing 90s about it. The only difference is it wasn't an explicitly thrash album. So for me, it's like, it's what came after the Black Album that became more of the grunge, different guitar tones and all that kind of stuff. But up till then, I mean, just watch them at the big Moscow show in 1991, because they were touring on that album. And you can tell me that's not the most ferocious metal performance you have ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't find anything that's a remotely close second. And for me, when I took my kids to see them, and it was crowded as heck, we had to park far away. And so we're walking through to get into the stadium, and I'm looking at all of the cars, and I'm noticing, wow, if I go back to seeing Metallica in 83 and 84 on the Kill 'Em All tour, it wasn't this many cars, and B, it wasn't these kind of cars. It was more like, when Spicoli rides up in Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the van and they all pour out with pot smoke coming out. That's the way it was like back then. You could walk through this stadium parking lot, and I could have told you we were walking into the Super Bowl, and you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Escalades, Mercedes, Porsche, all the way down to mom and pop vans. I mean, it was, you could not tell the clientele based on the cars. It was no different than a professional football game out there. No different. So I'm thinking, well, what am I going to see when I go inside? And I had to look pretty hard to find somebody with long hair. But everybody had on a Metallica shirt. And yeah, there were kids there. There were teenagers there, all with Metallica shirts on. And I'm like, dude, you can't argue with that. Well, Sure, they're not listening to Skeleton Witch. They're not listening to Carcass. They're not listening to Napalm Death. Whatever. We could talk about this stuff all day long. But I guarantee you more people do listen to those bands, because once they get their appetite whet by Metallica, they're like, okay, I'm now used to teeth. So let me get some sharper teeth. Let me hear something else. And that brings them into, because again, if metal has revolutionized your life, and it has with you, you're surrounded by it, right? You want to see it. It's tangible. You've got a whole record collection behind you. It's tangible, something that you can touch. You want to be still surrounded by the culture of metal. Why would you withhold that, from somebody else? Because somebody else may be trying to channel their aggression through some, pop artist, and they're a metalhead. But just like us, I didn't start, on Black Sabbath. It's not where I started. I didn't have an older brother to give it to me. I had to find it on my own. It was Kiss who did it for me. It had to be something pop enough to get onto the Paul Lynde Halloween special in order for me to see it through the very limited media of television, which had only 6 channels at the time. But look at what the power of music did. So to me, it's like, preach it, man. I don't care who the band is, just get it out there.
Yeah, and if it helps people, like you said, discover other artists. I never. Sometimes I'm at a show and people get upset if they see like younger kids with like jean jackets with patches that they bought off the internet. Somebody made the vest for them, or people get mad that you're seeing AC/DC or Black Sabbath shirts at some store in the mall. And I say, hey man, if this kid paid his money to get into this show, maybe it's their first show, maybe they're just they're learning about it, welcome them with open arms, man. Bring them in, because we have to keep passing this on to the younger generations. I've got a 16-year-old son, and he's just in the last year or so really started to get into music, and he's always coming up to me, saying, he says just to me the other day, he said, what did he say? He said, who's that band that does the song Enter Sandman? We were talking about Metallica. And I was like, it's Metallica. I'll tell you another great story. This was like about 5 years ago. I was in a probably more than that, because Best Buy still had CDs at this point. So I'm in a Best Buy, and there's a kid, no more than 10 years ago. There's a kid probably about 12 years old. He's got an AC/DC hat on. He's there with his mom, and he's got Back in Black, the CD, in his hand.
Wow.
His mom's buying it for him. And I thought, how cool is that? And I'm sure the kid has heard some of these songs before.
Sure.
But this kid is going home and a smile on this kid's face. Mom's buying him this CD that he probably bugged her about. Yeah. This kid is going to go home and hear that full album for the first time. And I love the energy from younger kids. When I see younger kids at the scene, I just love it, because it takes me back to when I was younger, when I had Back in Black in my hands, and I was like, hurry up in the line. Come on, I gotta get home to listen to this. I was just so excited and so passionate about it. And it was such an exciting time. So yeah, man, we got to encourage the youth to just, keep this.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. I mean, I do, in a sense, I understand how metal heads can be touchy and sectarian and genre specific and all. I mean, I get it, because it's so important. The music means so much to them. They don't like compromise, I get it. I went to speak at a event in Alberta, Canada, I think back in 2013. My buddy who I mentioned earlier, Todd, he went with me, and it was called the Noctis Festival. It was a big heavy metal several day event, and there was music at night, and then they would have like expo during the day with just tables and vendors, and then they had workshops going on at the same time. So like, what's his name from Banger Media was there speaking?
Scott McFarlane?
No, the I'm talking about.
Yeah, the guy that does all the movies and stuff.
Does all the movies, did the Rush documentary too.
Yeah,
and anyway, Sam
Dunn.
Sam Dunn.
Scott McFarlane is the guy from The Simpsons, I think. What the heck was I thinking? What was I thinking?
Samsonite. I was way off. But
Sam Dunn, yeah.
But so they had a bunch of people there, and in fact, some of the bands they had Possessed, Girls' School, Exciter. I
Wow.
saw Exciter in a small bar. That was cool. Candlemass.
Nice.
He was badass, dude. But anyway, so Alberta, Canada's in the middle of the country. And what had happened was David Brockie, may he rest in peace, was a singer from Gore. He was supposed to speak and he had something else go on. So last minute, the lady who was running the event was a follower of Metal Motivation. So she said, hey, any chance you could jump on a plane and come out here? I said, can I bring my buddy? She said, yeah. So we took off and we went there. This is, again, Alberta, Canada, which is like the Texas of Canada.
Yeah.
You know?
Oil, right? Oil capital.
Yeah, so it's all just middle. The nicest people I've ever met in my life. Cops, everybody was nice as, I mean, almost like, is this the Twilight Zone or something? You guys got something up your sleeve because you got it too damn nice. But we went there and it was held at a campus, at a college campus, which is a great venue that they had. And it was going on simultaneously while school was going on. And there was no problems. It was great. So what we noticed first off is we tended to be the older people, that the majority of them were late teens or early 20s.
Wow.
The majority. But they were all dressed like we used to be dressed back in the 80s. Skinny jeans, high tops, jean jackets, cut off sleeve, leather jackets, just flat out long hair. And there at night when the bands were playing, there was no mosh pits. That was weird. There was no mosh pits. But there was universal, I mean, heavy, hardcore headbanging.
Nice.
And we were like, are we in a time warp? And my buddy looked at me. He goes, dude, I'm kind of wondering if we're metal enough to be here. I'm like, you know what? You got a point. Because these kids were like
Old
serious.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even see a Pantera shirt there. They had black metal bands and thrash bands and that kind of stuff. So it was definitely not the States. It was definitely, and I always said that about Canada. One thing I also appreciate this about the New England Northeast area, which is why I'm glad I would keep going back and forth, because and I was in Texas for a number of years, and the Texas metal scene has never quite gotten over Dimebag's death. Mm. So they're kind of stuck in a way. Some of them are. It just kind of has that Black Label Society, Pantera thing, bandanas and camo shorts and, that kind of thing. Whereas what I always loved about New York, and me and my buddy, Metal Mike Klesiak, talk about this all the time. Metal Mike is, he was lead guitar player for Halford.
Okay. Yeah.
But because he's from Poland. And so we always talk about, dude, we're more that European vibe. We like the European vibe where it's kind of it's like, man, how do you describe it? Well, like Priest used to be, just more straight leather studs. It's not so bandana and camo shorts and Converse high tops. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a bit more regal. It's a bit more put together. I hate to say it. I'm not being critical. I have camo shorts. I'm not being. I have Pantera shirts. Okay. But what I'm saying is it's the culture of Canada is more European.
Yeah.
So I'm probably not going to see Candlemass here in Raleigh. I'll see Candlemass there. I'll probably see Candlemass in New England. So New England has a little bit more of that sort of European vibe to it because it's on the coast. You know what I mean? That's why it like Lars and James and those guys and Brian Slagle were getting the metal in LA early on, new wave of British heavy metal. And so also the guys up in Exodus and whatnot up in San Francisco. And the only other outfit was on the East Coast in New York City because those were the main ports of entry. So they were getting the imports and things long before we would get them in Texas. So I had to literally fly back to New York in order to keep up with the real, because that's where I took my buddy up there in the mid 80s. And I took him to Lemoore, the greatest rock bar you've ever been to. Lemoore in Brooklyn. We saw Tank, Carnivore with Pete Steele. And I can't remember who the other band was, but I remember just beforehand, we were just hanging out. We got there early, so nobody was really there. And I'm at the bar and this guy comes up to me and starts talking to me, and it's Bobby Gustafson from Overkill. And
Wow.
I look over, dude, and walks by me was Vito Bratta from
White
White
line.
Lion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I saw later on that night, saw what's his name? Was a singer, Mike Tramp
Yeah.
from. But anyway, so I would have to go back to New York, and I went up with him. And while I was up there, Exodus had just played, and so a lot of people had all these Exodus stuff going on, T-shirts and stuff. So we were able to keep up with what was happening there. So I got Bonded by Blood when I was up there, and then the SOD album had just come out.
Yeah.
Stormtroopers of Death. So people had that, and we were like, "What is that? What is that?" So it hadn't even really made it out yet. They just released the record. So by being up there, though, we were able to snag it and then bring it back to Texas. But yeah, man, it's just, again, like I said at the outset, it was exciting to be a part where you had to pay the price to
Yeah.
get everything. You had to sweat and labor and walk and wait and be patient as hell to get, whatever was, cutting edge and about to come out. So the tape trading was another big part of that. And it was just a great time to be alive, man.
All right. So what was the moment then where the light bulb went off? What inspired, got you thinking about doing Metal Motivation?
Well, I had always done some sort. I was in spiritual communities early on, and so you get a lot of, speaking and coaching and counseling and that type therapy type stuff. So I was always participating in something like that, and it took me 2 years of summer school to get out of high school, and I didn't go to college initially. So I have I'm a voracious reader now, but that's not necessarily the way I started. So I was always of that bent. And then the other half of my life is marketing and media. And so I was helping a friend of mine in 2007 with his coaching business. And so we were going over his material and figuring out how to market it. And so I told him, I started to share my personal motivational philosophy. He goes, dude, I really love some of the stuff you're saying. It feels like it really jives with what I'm saying. He's kind of a no BS kind of guy. And so we teamed up, and I said, I have this name I want to use. I've got the website. It's called 10 Times More. And he said, I like it. Let's do it. So we started to formulate that. And then by the end of 2007, he said he got the bright idea to run for Congress. So he decides to run for Congress, and that kind of took the wind out of the sails. He goes, well, it's kind of more your baby anyway, so why don't you take it? And well, I don't know. I didn't really know what to do with it. And so I kind of just sat on it. And then by about March or so, I was sitting at my desk watching YouTube just in the other room. And I was watching this guy, and he looked like a punk rocker. But you could tell he was a musician and a videographer because the video was very well done. But he was talking about like the secret kind of stuff, law of attraction kind of thing, manifesting with your mind and thoughts and whatnot. But it was so well done. And it's weird because he's from Canada, but yet he had like a Brooklyn accent and dressed like a punk rocker. And he called himself like a rock and roll motivator. And so I'm watching him, and I'm just like, this, forget the content. It was just great how he did it. And I thought, what a brilliant way to do that. Because again, I'm in marketing and branding. So I'm like, that's great.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting back in my chair. I said, I thought to myself, I said, if I did this, I would do it heavy metal. And I thought, So I wrote down metal motivation on a piece of paper. And that's where the germ of the idea started. And then I reconnected with my buddy, Todd, who I've mentioned a few times. And I told him about it. He goes, dude, there's a lot of money in that motivational stuff. And I said, well, I just like to sell some shirts, to be honest with you. So we started talking about doing this project together, and I started doing the design work and whatnot. So I do all the design graphics for all my shirts and stuff. And it started to really formulate and come together. So again, at this time, it was the perfect storm because prior to social media, if somebody was going to sit down in front of their computer and search for something, they're not going to say, I wonder if there's a heavy metal version of a motivational speaker or something. They wouldn't put that in. They would just say how to be more motivated. And whatever came up is whatever came up. They wouldn't care who was delivering it. So metal motivation is not something that's searched for. Metal motivation is something that's shared, which is the big difference between early internet and post social media internet. Prior to social media, information was searched for. After social media, it's more shared than it is anything else. And so that was when we were launching at that pivotal time, 2008, 2009. So at first I started writing chapters for a book I was going to call Metal Up, Personal Strength in a Messed Up World. And so he goes, how's the book going? I goes, I'm writing like a fiend. I said, but we don't have an audience to sell it to. I said, so you know what I might do, dude, is I'm going to take sections of the book and just start creating blog posts out of it. We'll start with a blog. Maybe we'll get something set up on Facebook and YouTube and see if we can start building and still MySpace was around, and see if we can start building an audience there. Then we'll have something to sell to. So that's kind of where it started. And then we launched it in Halloween of 2009. And again, this Halloween will be 12 years.
Awesome. So what would you say are some of the core kind of tenets and essential ideas that kind of run through your program, of maybe the philosophy of, you know, the core central idea to mental motivation and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I call it the Metaloscopy, and I finish every video with the line, "And whatever you do, don't suck. Metal up."
And by the way, that is what inspired everybody out there. When at the end of my videos, I go, remember, stay heavy, stay metal. I always have this tagline at the end, and that's what inspired me to do it. Was
great.
Was yeah,
so. For sure. It's memorable, man. It's memorable.
Yeah.
It's about healthy aggression. It's very much like heavy metal is. I always tell people, they say, is heavy metal, then when they ask, we talked about this earlier, but when they ask, is heavy metal motivational? I said, well, look at the history of it. Starting from Black Sabbath, never getting the airplay, always marginalized, hated, despised. During the 80s, we had metal stars like Ozzy and Rob Halford and Dee Snider in court trying to defend themselves from being sued for helping kids commit suicide or defending metal against censorship. So metal has never gotten a fair shake by the mainstream, ever. And you don't become the worldwide dominance. Again, we talked about Metallica being the biggest touring band in history of all kind. Every band, doesn't matter the musical genre, they're the biggest touring band in history is Metallica. Well, you don't go from Sabbath to Metallica like that unless you got to fight uphill the whole way, hated, grenades and machine gun fire coming down at you, nothing but heartache and setback and death, like your bass player dying mysteriously in a bus accident. All of the stuff that metal has had to endure over the years didn't happen by magical thinking. It didn't happen by fatalism. It didn't happen by wishful thinking. It happened because of aggressiveness, determination, hard work, a refusal to quit. So to me, that's what it is. And I think one of the big points that I like to make and that people often miss is that my favorite word, I would sum up my entire motivational philosophy in one word, and that is determination. Determination is the opposite of fatalism. Now, fatalism doesn't mean fatal as in die or death, or he suffered a fatal wound. Fatalism is in our language all the time, where we say things like, well, it's not meant to be, or I want to discover my destiny. You see people all the time when they announce, hey, so-and-so's in a relationship with so-and-so on Facebook, right? And everybody starts commenting, it was meant to be, until they break up 3 months later. And then it was like, well, it wasn't meant to be. Well, which is it? Is it meant to be or is it not meant to be? Or they'll say, well, if it was meant to be, things would work out, or life will work itself out. No, this is all fatalistic, leaving things up to chance, leaving things up to circumstance, instead of you saying, no, I will decide and determine and plan and execute the desired outcome that I have. That's determination. And it's the idea that you can create the life that you want. If I came to your house every day and held a gun to your head, and your dream was to own $1 billion company, I could get you to that place just by showing up, putting a gun to your head, and getting you to do whatever is required for that day, and ensuing days that it would take to create this billion-dollar business. It's not impossible. It's definitely possible, but you obviously don't have someone coming to your house every day putting a gun to your head. The point is, you do have the potential. You do have the power. You do have the ability. You don't have the will necessarily, but you have the ability. And that's good news. It's good news to know that the problem is me. If you're telling me the problem is you, CJ, you're giving me good news because I can change me. If you're telling me, oh, the universe just hasn't destined me for this, hasn't chosen this for me, life just isn't going my way, too many obstacles, all the roadblocks say don't go this way. If that, I can't change fate, I can't change the metal. If the metal gods have determined that I'm just going to suck in life, what can I do about it? Not a damn thing. But it's not up to that. It's up to me and my refusal to quit. So that's why I said it's expunged of magical thinking. Now, I'm not saying that the law of attraction doesn't work, or that if some form of meditation or a prayer or some incantation or a tarot card, whatever you subscribe to, I'm not saying those things don't work. Maybe you can give me particular situations where those did work. Good. But I can't prove that, number one. And number two, I can't say those principles will work for every person, no matter who they are and what situation they're in. So I wanted Metal Motivation to be based on proven principles of achievement, proven principles of personal change. So I define success as simply this: maximize all that you are, which is all that you are as a person, maximize all that you are and all that you can do for a purpose greater than yourself. If you do that, maximize all that you are as a person so that you can sleep with yourself at night, right? No guilty conscience. And all that you can do, your abilities, your talents, your experience, your knowledge, if you can maximize those things, just keep maximizing, multiplying them, working on them, growing them, and do that to serve a purpose greater than yourself, you will find the greatest kind of success, fulfillment, not happiness. I know the movie's called The Pursuit of Happiness, but happiness is an empty pursuit. Happiness means you got a new car, you're happy. Your car got wrecked, you're unhappy. It's fleeting. What you want is fulfillment, which is a deep and lasting satisfaction. It's got the word full and the word fill in it. And when you're full and you're filled, you don't want anything else. You're satisfied. Fulfillment comes as a result of developing all that you are, all that you can do, serving a purpose greater than yourself. Even if that purpose is as simple as making somebody else smile. I don't care what it is. As long as you're leaving an impact on the world, no matter how small that little world is, you don't have to get on behind the microphone like you or me and try to influence, masses of people. Just be that firebrand in your world, wherever your high tops take you. Be that fuse, be that ignition, be the spark, be the firebrand, be the banner into battle, be the signaler, be the one who sets a higher standard, be the example. Embody this. Let the idea that you serve or the purpose that you serve, become in fleshly form, and let it walk in front of people and talk and breathe, and so it can be touched and handled, and it can be, something that others can follow. That's Metaloscopy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm down with that.
Hell yeah,
That's
man.
inspiring. All right. So, what are some of the things you think that do prevent people from achieving their goals?
Well, I think the first thing is what we just described, which was fatalism. They just don't think they can do anything. That life, that the future is going to resemble the past, and I can't defeat it. Why should I expect my future to be any different? People have been mean to me throughout my life. People have abused me throughout my life. So people are going to continue to do that. And what happens is they eventually justify it. They start thinking, well, I must have done something. It's obviously me. Something hates me. It's not that like that way for this person over here or that person over there. So somehow they deserve it and I don't. So we all have this innate sense of justice and injustice, right and wrong. We just feel like The sins must be atoned, right? The crimes must be punished. And so if this leads me to the other thing that people are hurt by or blocked by is guilt and self-condemnation. You know, the word condemn is actually a building term. It's what you say about a building when it's not usable anymore. You can't, don't go in that building. Thing's condemned, man. They'll fall on you, right? It's no longer usable, no longer fit for use. So when you condemn yourself, when you are guilt ridden, you don't feel like you deserve the success that you want, and yet you can't come up with a specific reason why, because whatever reason you can come up with, I can find people that are twice the devil you are who are living the exact life that you want. So don't tell me deserve has anything to do with it. You just have this innate sense of justice and injustice, right and wrong, crimes must be punished. And so even though you haven't done anything deserving of jail time and no judge or jury is going to sit in judgment of you, you'll do it to yourself. And you will literally withhold yourself from living the life that you could live because you feel like it's justified. That you are the criminal who deserves punishment. You're the loser because if you were a winner, your past wouldn't have been the way it was. But people obviously abused you, spoke ill of you, hurt you, did things against you. So you obviously must deserve it. And so, the punishment fits the crime. And so you withhold yourself. And so then that takes us into the abuse part where people are literally abused by others. And so they're so used to the hurt and the abuse that they withhold from living the life that they could live. Because what they're thinking is, well, not until the past is rectified. But nobody's coming back to apologize. Nobody's coming back to make it up for you. You're going to have to make it up for yourself. So I always tell them, I say, listen, you're going to wait a long time for somebody to come. And even if they did, would that fix anything? Does that erase the past? So I asked them, I say, what life would you live had nothing bad ever happened to you? What would you be doing now? What would you be building now in your life had nothing bad ever happened? Nobody ever abused you or hurt you. Well, I'd be doing this and this and this. Well, then go ahead and do it. Because the way to get payback for the past is to build a future that looks like payback for the past. Don't reward those who hurt you by punishing yourself, by robbing yourself of the future that you're fully capable of producing. It's not easy. I get that. That's the number one comment I received, my friend, online. Number one comment that I have received over 12 years is this: easier said than done. Every time I offer one of these points, it's easier said than done. To which I say, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Everything is easier said than done, but you look ridiculous dressed up in excuses. In other words, it's easier for me to say, brush your teeth, than it is for you to actually do it. It's easier for me to say, iron that shirt, than it actually is for you to do it. Guess what? Every single action is easier said than done. So why are we talking about that? And if I acknowledge it, I'm going to acknowledge the fact that your past was the worst of anybody who's ever lived. We're going to agree. I'm going to sign a contract that says, I fully agree your past was the worst. And I'm going to sign a contract that says, I fully agree that it's easier said than done. So now that we got that out of the way, now what? Because all you're doing is blowing a bunch of sunshine up my backside to justify where you are and excuse yourself from getting started now. That's what you're doing. You're avoiding the implication and the responsibility of your potential future. You scare the hell out of you.
Yeah.
That's what blocks people.
And sometimes I say sometimes you just got to go ahead and do it. You may fall down. It may not be right this time. I'm a big hockey fan, and I'm a Philadelphia Flyers fan. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, and famous Philadelphia Flyer Rick Tocchet, who was a rough and tumble guy that scored a lot of goals, but also fought a lot. Real tough guy.
Hmm.
And I remember he got beat up pretty bad in a fight during the game. And in the press conference afterwards, one of the reporters asked him, oh, how does it feel? You lost that fight. Was it embarrassing? And all this other stuff. And he said, hey, uh, sometimes when the bell rings, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. It just matters that when the bell rang, you answered it.
Hmm.
And
Show up.
that's like I always remember that. It's like, doesn't matter if you win or lose. It just matters that, hey, you got up, you went for it, you fell down, you got back up, and you went for it again.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I a lot of people will suffer from a lack of confidence. They just don't trust themselves. They just don't believe in themselves. You tell some people it's up to you, and that will scare the daylights out of them. What you want to be able to get to the place is when someone tells you it's up to you, they're giving you good news because you're, well, good, because I can depend on me. That's not the case for most people. But you didn't get to that place of having a lack of confidence overnight. It wasn't one thing that did it to you. It was a multiple. It was a accumulation of little defeats over time that got you to that place. But that just tells you how you can get out of it. It's going to be an accumulation of a lot of little victories over time that builds up the confidence again. And the number one little victory you got to win every day is showing up, just like you said, is you've got to just be there. It may not be the greatest day. You may not get everything done on your to-do list. You may not have been in the best mood. You may have been crabby or cranky all day. You may have been tired. You might have put out half the effort. I don't care. Just show up. It's not a race. All you, as Metallica's song "Better Than You," that's all you really got to do.
Yeah.
He's talking about somebody else, but I mean, just you got to be better than you. Or as my friend says, if we cloned you today, could you kick your clone's ass tomorrow?
That's correct.
Or as I like to say, to be a badass, you have to kick ass, and the first ass to kick is your own.
Yeah.
So it's just showing up every day and just learning. You're gonna gather steam, and you're gonna build up the synergy and the momentum that's needed from all the resources around you, and you'll be cooking with gas in no time. But for a lot of people, I got to be honest with you, I mean, people will say, they'll ask me oftentimes if I ever get any trolls, especially on YouTube, and YouTube is troll
Oh, I know.
central, you know what
I've
I mean?
I've got a few of them.
But I surprisingly, I thought on both Facebook and on YouTube I was going to get tons of them, and surprisingly I didn't. But every now and again you'll get somebody who will troll, and they'll say, you know, only weak people need this kind of stuff. This is just a crutch for people and whatever, which is not true at all. Um, it's not anybody following me or anything. I tell people, listen, um, my goal is to make somebody else. My goal is not to help you get over your stuff. The reason why we want to help you get over your stuff is so that you can get back to your post. Because the post of your life is unguarded. You're not fulfilling your mission in life so long as you're still licking all your wounds, trying to get over stuff. Let's get you past your stuff so that you can get back to productivity and determination and government and mastery and living, the best life that you possibly can, large and in charge. We got to get you back to your post. We just can't do it if you're sidelined all the time. So for me, I want people to become metal motivators. I want them to go be that. Even though I'll say I'm the metal motivator, definite article. Technically, I'm a metal motivator. One amongst many. You're a metal motivator, brother. You are. You're just as much a metal motivator as I am. It has nothing to do with the official label or logo. It has to do with someone who, what metal did for them is what they're doing for others. That's as simple as we can make it.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned earlier that you have sort of a background in branding and merchandise. So tell everybody out there about some of the merchandise that you have, t-shirts and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, at Metal Motivation Store, and that's how I really set this up. I knew it's difficult to sell information, quote unquote, online, unless it's like in a book or something like that. People understand buying a book, but so you can't. I mean, you got to do a lot of free content. It's just all there is to it. So to me, I always thought, well, if people will imbibe that metal attitude, metal up, and those the kind of different like phrases that I'll use, then they'll wear that attitude and support the metal motivation mission. So I came up with a whole line of shirts and hats and mugs and things like that, and at Metal Motivation Store. So the other thing was I didn't want it to have anything to do with me. So you're not going to find any Metal Motivator t-shirt. You're not going to find my name. You're not going to find my face on anything. The shirts speak specifically to the person who's wearing it. So I've got shirts that say my blood type is metal. It says my self-talk is metal. It says eat, drink, and be metal. It says motivated by metal, or it just says metalhead, or and whatever you do, don't suck. Yeah, you got the metal shirt. It just says metal.
Yeah.
And the reason why I did that was because I just mentioned one of the reasons. The other reason was is that when someone wears a band T-shirt, they're not just saying I'm a fan of the band. They're saying I'm a metalhead, right? So sometimes you can't wear the Cannibal Corpse T-shirt to the cousin's kid's birthday party. But really all you're saying is I'm a metalhead. So I just give you a shirt that says metalhead or metal. We kind of just cut to the chase and say it very, very simple.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of great stuff. So check it out on metalmotivationstore.com. But the sole purpose of it is A, to give you a chance to wear your attitude, and B, it's a great way to support the Metal Motivation mission.
Awesome. All right. Well, as we get to wrap this up, I want to hit you with just a couple of quick, fast questions. Okay. So you can't think too long about this. You got to give us a quick answer.
Scary, dude. Ready? This is scary.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Give me a few Desert Island albums that you got to have with you on that desert island.
Oh, that's such a tough question to answer. Yeah, if I'm in desert island, I'm stuck for life. I'm gonna take the first 3 Metallica records, just because I know it's lasting. I'm gonna take the initial albums that rocked my world. I'll take the first 3 Metallica records. I'm taking the initial Megadeth records. I'm taking the first 4 Iron Maiden records. It's gonna be all old stuff. I'll take Kiss Destroyer, or maybe Kiss Alive 2. I don't know. Van Halen 1. Yeah, it's a tough one, man. God, it's a tough one. Oh, yeah, it's a tough one.
Good choices, though. Good choices. All right, favorite guitar player.
Favorite guitar player of all time is going to be Eddie Van Halen.
Favorite singer.
Favorite singer. It's a toss up between Dio and Halford. Rob Halford.
Okay. Best concert you ever attended?
Oh, wow. Iron Maiden Number of the Beast tour.
Awesome. All right. Well, there you go.
Those are great questions, dude.
All right. I would like to thank CJ for joining me here at the Lair today. This was really great, really motivational. It was fantastic hearing your story too, reminiscing about the early days of discovering heavy metal. So I encourage everybody in the description down below, I'm going to have links that are going to take you to all of Metal Motivation, the website, and all the different social media things. I encourage you to check them out and get some merchandise like this cool shirt that I have on. So CJ, thank you for joining me here at the Lair.
Dude, it was great to be with you. I look forward to doing this again sometime, and I'll be sure to post all this stuff on all my social media channels as well.
Awesome. So give us your tagline.
And whatever you do, don't suck. Metal up.
And remember, stay heavy, stay metal.